Welcome back, everyone. We obviously are getting into kind of the pregame to the big game when the polls start to close here, but we're getting a sense already from some of the exit polls that Andrew can break out for us here as to where we are right now. But to give you a sense, it seems to be a very passionate electorate. A lot of people showing up at polls all over the places, and that is a good thing. Let's bring in our panel right now, along with Andrew, you know before. I've got to my immediate right here, Chris Shays, former congressman from Connecticut. We got Dave Pollak here, who's got too many titles for me to get to, but suffice to say, he is got the pulse on not only the young electorate. He worked with Obama in 2008 here and has an active role in this campaign as well. And we have former Congressman Dick Zimmer from the great state of New Jersey. All right, guys. I'm going to break down with Andrew in a second the numbers we're learning, the states we're to watch. But you think we're in for a long night, or do you think we're going to learn here? Is this a repeat of 2008, or are we going to have a declarative winner here before midnight? Dave, we'll start with you.
Well, it could be a long night just because of, as you said, there's a lot of people turning out, so that could reflect itself in long lines, in provisional ballots, a lot of the new rules requiring IDs and so forth. But I personally don't think that there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. It's not as clear as last time, but I think that we're likely to have a winner tonight at some point.
You buy that?
I think so, especially because some of the biggest swing states are in the East, and geographically that means the polls will close, and presumably we'll have projections, if not final results, relatively early.
We are already hearing, though, and maybe it just seems more acute since we all remember 2000 so well, but voting irregularities, people pressing a button in Pennsylvania. He's been getting calls out there on this for, let's say, Obama to click his Romney, and they keep doing it. It keeps going the other way. You got people turned away, reports of voter intimidation. You think these are so marginal? You think they're big enough? We've got 2,500 attorneys just for Democrats in Ohio, and you can use that as a metric across, Congressman. It seems that there's a lot of loose ends tonight.
Well, I think there are a lot of reporters trying to find loose ends. I don't think that's it's any different than what's happened in the past. There will be areas where there'll be complaints, and I think we will know before 12 tonight who our next president is. It's amazing.
Yes.
It's amazing.
It is. Andrew, run us through here some of the places that we're going to keep a close eye on.
All right, well, we've identified 8 states that we think could be they're swing states, but they also could tell us a lot as the evening progresses about who may be in a better position, whether it's Mitt Romney or Barack Obama. Here are the 8 states that we're keeping an eye on. And you can see there's a number of electoral votes. These are among the swing states that you've been hearing all campaign long may decide this election. But we want to spotlight each one of them individually in the order that they're going to close, or the polls are going to close. The first one's Virginia. The polls close at 7 o'clock there. Very late poll movement in the poll averages. Romney had been up 0.3 of a point yesterday. Now it's Obama up 0.3 of a point. If there's an early call in this race for either one, I think that'll give you a good idea that it's a strong night for them. Next at 7:30, we will get the state of Ohio. Everybody, as you know, has been saying Ohio could determine this election. The polls still have it leaning for Barack Obama at this point. North Carolina is another one to keep your eye on. At 7:30, it closes as well. This should be a win for Mitt Romney, at least according to most of the polling that we're seeing. If there's a long delay, if it's running late into the night, or if it comes out for Obama, that could indicate a bad night for Mitt Romney as well. Next is Florida. Florida has been starting to trend Obama in the last couple of days as we've been approaching Election Day. And again, if there's an early call in Florida, that could be indicative of things to come. New Hampshire as well. New Hampshire has been contested. Mitt Romney made a stop there. Obama's up a little bit in the polls. If there's an early call in this race, it'll also give you an idea of who's in a stronger position. Pennsylvania may be the least swing state of the swing states that we've got identified here. The polls close in Pennsylvania at 8 o'clock. Obama has been leading in most of the polling that we've seen. The Romney campaign's made a late push. If there's an early call in this race, again, for Barack Obama, that may be an indication that it's a long night for Mitt Romney as well. We're also keeping an eye on Colorado and Wisconsin. They close later on in the night. Colorado with a slight advantage to Barack Obama in the polling. Wisconsin a stronger leaning for Barack Obama. And again, if that comes in early, right at 9 o'clock, let's say, Wisconsin comes in for Obama, by that point, it may be a moot point. But
what's going to be a bad night for Obama? I mean, you've been saying, it's going to be a bad night if this happens for Romney. If the
Well, there are more past the 270 from Obama. Everybody universally agrees than there are for Romney. And if he doesn't get Ohio, it's a tough road to get there, isn't it? I mean, he's almost got to carry every swing state to make the magic number.
So, but what's the tough road for Obama?
Well, I think that if Obama loses Virginia and if he loses Florida, he's got no margin of error. And I think that's the way to do it. But I think that if he pulls off a surprise in Virginia, then, he could lose Iowa. He could lose a couple of the states that could go either way. And he still gets to that number because he starts already in the bank with more. You buy that?
Yeah, I do. But Chris, I think the answer is that in the early states that close by 9 p.m., there's more treacherous results for Romney than there are for Obama just by the layout of those states. Obama could lose Florida, could lose North Carolina, could lose Virginia. Doesn't really affect his core strategy that much. The real only threat for Obama in the early states is if Pennsylvania is close, which I don't think it will be. And if Pennsylvania isn't called right away, or Pennsylvania is going late in the night, then that's going to be nervous ground for Obama.
Let me ask you about Pennsylvania, because it took a lot of people by surprise, and I'm curious why Romney made that last stop there in Pennsylvania when a lot of people thought this is in the column for Obama. Either it was a sign of desperation or maybe he had some internal numbers that said this was another swing state that he could put in play.
It could have been both. His polls may have shown that it was as close in Pennsylvania as it was, say, in Wisconsin. And it wasn't a big commitment to go to Western Pennsylvania and overlap into the Ohio media market. What surprised me was when he went to Morrisville, Pennsylvania, which is within eyeshot of Trenton, New Jersey, and was strictly hitting the Philadelphia media market. I think he was, earlier on when he was planning it, he was probably hoping that our governor would cross the river to be with him, add some support. But that, to me, indicated it was you don't play head games and you don't do feints the weekend before the election. So I believe that he saw this as a worthwhile shot, and perhaps it's because other states were fading away.
Republicans think they're going to pick up some congressional seats in Pennsylvania, so they're pretty energized, and I'm sure they, said to Romney, "You can win this state."
Look, you said it yourself. Without Ohio, the electoral math almost becomes impossible for Romney. So they had to come up with something because Ohio has been trending towards Obama. And I think Pennsylvania is one of the few states that's large enough, but also close enough that says we got to take a shot at this because if we're not going to get Ohio, we got to come up with something else. So I think it was with not necessarily a head feint, but I do think it came a little bit out of desperation.
I think they are trying to expand the map a little bit, but there was also some polling in the Casey-Smith Senate race that showed Smith, the Republican, closer to Casey, the incumbent, than a lot of people had anticipated, getting it into single digits. And they may have looked at that as a barometer that said, you know what, there may be a movement here against Bob Casey and, by extension, maybe against the president.
Now, before I even ask this, I know it's not going to change any votes, but usually, day of the election, in this case, they'd be hanging out in Chicago and Boston. Instead, Mitt Romney's campaigning the day of, and all of a sudden you got the Joe Biden jet flying down. You have 3 jets literally between Ryan and obviously Romney, and then Joe Biden there on the same tarmac. I mean, it looked a little comical. Either this says Romney wants this thing more than anything, and he'll campaign the day of. He'll campaign until literally the last poll closes, or it did have a little bit of a whiff of, my God, I'm going to go to Pennsylvania. I'm going to go to Ohio here until the last thing. I got to do anything I can to scrounge up a few votes. Were you a little surprised?
No. And let me my wife went up to New Hampshire last night. She got there 2 hours before.
She got mad at you, right?
She waited 2 hours to get in. She waited 2.5 hours for him to speak. The place was packed. She said when he walked in, it erupted like she has never seen.
Really?
Lots of emotion, lots of pride, lots of people feeling this guy can do it. It has a little bit of a Reagan feel to me. I mean, it really does.
Well, I will tell you, Dave, from my end, always the standard rule is huge turnout, advantage Democrats. And while that may be the case, and I think we're going to have turnout equal to 08, and who would have thought that a couple of years ago, right? I mean, or a year ago when we said, oh, people are, the 08 magic here, and you lived it, right? That, that thing's long gone. I think I don't know what the high turnout means, and I would have thought it was a given before, but so many people are turning out that were normally apathetic to the process that are going to vote one way or the other. I wouldn't be surprised if we hit numbers that we've never seen before.
I heard from a prominent Republican source that's reliable that the Koch brothers funded get out the vote phone banks made 14 million get out the vote calls in one day. That's never happened before in American policy. The amount of energy, the amount of money being spent, we may be witnessing the 2 largest get out the vote turnout operations that have ever existed in American politics. And so there is an element of the polls may not reflect the power of those machines that we haven't seen. But I must say, I do think when you look at the way the polls have shaken out over the last week, and when you do look at where the candidates have been going, I mean, he's spending his time in Pennsylvania trying to take a state away from Barack Obama.
Could you speak to get out the vote? Because people, and you're closer to this than me, but I know a lot of Obama folks who said a year ago plus, we're going to put all our energies, in addition to the typical stuff in the campaign, in a get out the vote. Because we know, the college kids aren't going to be banging on doors like they were in 08 here. We're not going to get all this free labor and everything else. We're going to have to build and keep that list, and we're going to have the best ground game you've ever seen with the get out the vote thing. Now, I've heard the words. Is it real?
As I said, I think it is unprecedented in American history, this get out the vote operation they've built. But I think the Republicans have also built one, very different, paid phone banks versus volunteer phone banks. And I think that's what's driving a lot of this turnout is you have 2 enormously energized parties. You have emotion, as you pointed out, on both sides of this race. You have people standing on line who are not going to leave, no matter how long those lines are. And I think that's partly what makes this race so exciting.
So tell me about the early voting. Before, Barack Obama 4 years ago was well ahead, and he's not ahead this time.
Well, it's hard to tell, right? Because they've reduced the amount of early voting. Okay. So with fewer hours, you have longer lines, you're going to have fewer people vote. I've actually heard stories that the lines on Election Day were a lot lower than the lines on early voting because they had crunched that so much. So it's hard to get the noise out of that.
Plus, you're also getting early voting in places like Texas, where you figure it's going to be a lopsided win for Mitt Romney, and that gets folded into the overall computation of the early voting numbers.
Okay. We jump to our next quick commercial break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about demographics here because, as you've heard here time after time, the female vote, the white male vote, the Latino vote, the black vote. Well, the fracturization here of the electorate, I think, has been probably more discussed and analyzed in this race than in many in recent memory. We're going to talk about that and what we might learn here by tonight as well. Please stay with us.